Hi, this is Eric Dunavant with Dunavant Wealth Group, our third quarter update for 2013. Our mission at Dunavant Wealth Group is doing good for you so you can do good for others. And I thought I'd spend this quarter asking you an interesting question. What is it? Well, what role does philanthropy play in your life? A lot of you might think that's a very personal question, and I agree it is. And often it leads to even more questions like, well, if I'm going to be a philanthropist, where am I going to give my money? Or how much might I need to give? But that's really not what I'm getting down to. What I want to do is I want to reframe the question, because did you know that whether you've planned to or not, every single one of us are philanthropists? What do I mean? Well, see, we're either voluntary philanthropists or we're involuntary philanthropists. Let me explain a little more. See, really, the way that the U.S. government is set up is that each one of us have two forms of capital. One form let's call family capital. This is money that you can keep, you have control over, you can kind of spend however you want to. The second form of capital, though, is what I'll call social capital. Social capital is capital that the U.S. government has set up that needs to be used for the greater good of U.S. society. When most of us think about that, the first thing that's going to pop into your mind is taxes. Well, in 1969, Congress passed laws to motivate American citizens to give more. What that allowed, though, was that for portions of social capital to be redirected to nonprofits and ministries of your choosing. Ultimately, you have a choice. You can pay all of your taxes without really any planning, and what you become is an involuntary philanthropist. Or you can strategically plan your giving, and what you become is a voluntary philanthropist. What's even more surprising, though, is that most families find that through strategic charitable planning, they can end up with more for themselves and more for their heirs by becoming voluntary philanthropists and giving money away. Now, every situation is different, and it really becomes dependent on what your family goals and your family situation is. But I think there's two important things you might want to know and consider that'll help expand your thinking. The first one is that capital gains and estate taxes are optional. They can both be avoided through strategic planning. And let's talk specifically about capital gains taxes and how that might apply to you. Think of our tax rates. The capital gains taxes went up this year for our highest income earners. And it's not the issue. When you sell an asset, you pay your capital gains taxes, and you might think, well, that's all. But that's not the big issue, because it's the money that you've now paid in taxes that you now have no use of for the rest of your life, and what that could have grown to during your lifetime that makes all the difference. And what that leads to next is understanding how control and ownership come into play in the thinking on this. See, control plus ownership equals maximum taxation. But if you have control without ownership, the tax code is actually written down to minimum taxation. Why are those important? Well, think of it this way. If you could have ownership of $1 million, but not have control of it, or you could have control of $1 million, but have no ownership, which one would you choose? What I find is that most people agree the latter is more favorable. Having control without the ownership would be more beneficial. Now, I've given you a lot to think about, and if you want to talk more about how this might benefit you or your family, give me a call. I think you're going to find that the world of voluntary philanthropy is more exciting than the alternative. See, our personal goal at Dunavant Wealth Group is to help show families how they can redirect over $1 billion to the nonprofits and charities of their choosing over the next 10 years. It's a pretty exciting journey to be on. At Dunavant Wealth Group, we pray for our clients and our families every day. If you've got a specific prayer request, would you send that in to us? We would love to pray for you. And now for the disclosures. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only. They're not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any specific individual. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific individualized tax advice. We suggest you discuss your specific tax issues with a qualified tax advisor. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice is offered through Dunavant Wealth Group, a division of Cardia Planning, LLC, a registered investment advisor and a separate entity from LPL Financial. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again in the fourth quarter of 2013.